6 weeks down in that metal can, and I thought I had it figured out. 3 miles beneath the Atlantic, hanging from cables thick as my waist, the research platform Nereid 7 had become my world. Every morning, though morning meant nothing when you're buried in permanent darkness, I'd roll out of my bunk and start the same routine. Check the atmospheric processors, verify hull integrity, download overnight data from the sensor arrays. The platform wasn't much to look at. Picture a submarine that got stretched into a cylinder, then packed with enough equipment to monitor half the ocean. 30 feet long, maybe 12 feet across, with reinforced titanium walls that groaned whenever the currents shifted. The designers had crammed every inch with purpose. Lab benches along one wall, computer terminals humming constantly, storage compartments labeled in 3 languages I couldn't read. My sleeping quarters took up a corner, just enough space for a narrow bunk and a footlocker. But it worked. The automated systems tracked water temperature, salinity, current patterns, marine migration routes. Dozens of sensors spread across the seafloor like electronic spiderwebs, feeding data back through fiber optic cables. My job was keeping everything running smooth while the surface team analyzed what we collected. The isolation didn't bother me much at first. Hell, I'd signed up knowing I'd be alone down here. 3 meals a day from sealed containers, water recycled through filters that could purify sewage into something cleaner than what comes from most taps. Air scrubbers working round the clock to keep the oxygen fresh and the carbon dioxide manageable. Everything calculated down to the gram. Jasmine Sutherland handled communications from the research vessel Cousteau floating somewhere above me. Twice daily check-ins at 0800 and 2000 hours. Professional, efficient. She'd ask about system status, equipment performance, any anomalies worth noting. I'd give her the numbers, confirm data transmission, sign off, clean and simple. The routine kept me grounded. Wake up, systems check, breakfast, maintenance rounds, lunch, data review, dinner, evening diagnostics, sleep, rinse and repeat. The platform's life support hummed constantly, a low-frequency vibration you felt in your bones more than heard. After the first week, that sound became background noise like living next to train tracks. What I didn't expect was how the sameness would start getting to me. Not boredom exactly, more like tunnel vision. Down here, your world shrinks to what you can touch. 30 feet of metal and electronics. No weather, no seasons, no random encounters with other people. Just you and the machines, day after day. The breakthrough came during week 6 while I was replacing a faulty circuit board in the communications array. Standard maintenance, pull the panel, swap the component, run diagnostics. But when I removed the access cover, something crinkled behind the wiring harness. A notebook, waterlogged and warped, pages stuck together with dried salt residue. Someone had wedged it deep behind the circuit panel, probably hoping it wouldn't be found during routine inspections. The cover was too damaged to read, but I could make out handwriting on the visible pages. I carefully peeled the notebook free and carried it to my workstation. The pages separated with effort, revealing entries written in blue ballpoint ink. Some sections had bled together where seawater had soaked through, but most remained legible. The first page I could read clearly showed a date, March 15th, 2019. Below that, neat handwriting in block letters, Noah Solomon, Marine Biology, University of Maine. Noah Solomon. I'd heard that name during my briefing, but only in passing. The marine biologist who'd operated Nereid 7 during its initial deployment. Management had mentioned he'd completed his assignment successfully before being reassigned to another project. Standard personnel rotation, they'd said. Nothing unusual. But finding his personal notebook hidden behind equipment panels didn't feel standard. I flipped through the early entries. Solomon's handwriting was precise, methodical. He documented water temperatures, current variations, species observations, professional notes about equipment calibration and maintenance schedules, the kind of detailed record-keeping that impressed supervisors and justified research budgets. Day 12, one entry read, recorded juvenile hammerhead migration through Sector 7 Alpha. Population estimates consistent with surface projections. Hull pressure nominal at 2.8 atmospheres. No equipment malfunctions. Normal stuff. The kind of reports I'd been filing myself. But as I continued reading, Solomon's tone began shifting. The handwriting stayed neat, but the content grew more personal. Less scientific observation, more stream of consciousness rambling. Day 47, sleep patterns irregular, dreaming about surface more frequently, Wonder if isolation protocols account for psychological adjustment period beyond initial training simulations. Day 53. Jasmine mentioned crew rotation might extend another month due to surface weather conditions. Acceptable. Routine remains manageable. Day 68. Noticed slight variations in hull stress readings during night hours. Probably thermal contraction as water temperature drops. Will monitor. I kept flipping pages, watching Solomon's documentation evolve from clinical observations to something approaching a diary. The handwriting started showing stress. Letters pressed harder into paper, words occasionally scratched out and rewritten. Then I reached the entries from month 3. The change was immediate and unsettling. Solomon's neat block letters became hurried scrawl, sentences running together without proper spacing. The content shifted from routine observations to something else entirely. Day 89. The tapping started again last night, 2:15 a.m., lasting approximately 30 minutes. Rhythmic pattern, 3 short taps followed by 2 long ones. Too deliberate for debris impact, too regular for structural settling. My hands went cold reading that. Tapping against the hull. I'd been down here 6 weeks and never heard anything like that. I read on. Day 91, ran full sonar sweep during tapping episode. No large objects within 500-meter radius. Water column shows normal density gradients. No geological activity on seafloor sensors. Yet the sound continues. Always between 2 and 4 a.m. Always the same pattern. Solomon had documented the tapping for weeks. 3 short, 2 long. Metal against metal, he wrote. Too loud to be marine life. Too rhythmic to be random debris. He checked everything. Hull integrity, external cameras, sonar arrays, seismic monitors. Nothing explained the source. The final entries I could read were barely legible, written in shaking handwriting that looked like someone fighting to control their pen. Day 112. It knows I'm listening now. Pattern changed last night. 5 short, 3 long. Pause, then repeated. Like it's trying to communicate. Jasmine says surface team detects no anomalies, but they're not down here. They don't hear what I hear. The notebook ended there. Pages after that were too water damaged to read, or missing entirely, but what I'd found was enough to make my skin crawl. Solomon had been down here alone for over 3 months, documenting something tapping against the platform's hull in the middle of the night. Something that showed up on no instruments but made sounds too deliberate to ignore. And according to his notes, whatever it was had started changing its pattern, like it was responding to his presence. I set the notebook down and looked around my cramped quarters. The same metal walls, the same humming equipment, the same recycled air. Everything exactly as it had been 10 minutes earlier. But now I couldn't shake the feeling that something might be out there in the darkness, waiting. Waiting for what? I had no idea. But Solomon's final entry kept echoing in my head. It knows I'm listening now. Looking back now, I can see how I talked myself into dismissing Solomon's reports. Pressure psychosis, that's what I called it. Hell, that's what the manuals called it too. Documented condition affecting deep-sea researchers. Hallucinations, paranoid thoughts, auditory disturbances. Made perfect sense. 3 miles down, your brain starts playing tricks. The isolation gets to you. Constant hum of the life support systems, recycled air that always tastes a little stale, walls pressing in from every direction. I'd read the case studies during training, researchers reporting voices in the ventilation shafts, shadows moving past the observation windows, phantom sonar contacts that disappeared when you looked twice. Solomon had been down here 8 months before his breakdown. 8 months of nothing but darkness and pressure and the slow grind of data collection. Of course he'd started hearing things. Of course he'd convinced himself something was watching him. Poor bastard probably needed medical leave 6 weeks before they finally pulled him up. I had it all figured out. Rational explanation for everything. That confidence lasted exactly 43 days. 2:17 in the morning, according to the chronometer on my bedside table. I remember the exact time because I was staring right at those green digits when it happened. Couldn't sleep. Again. Been having trouble with that since week 5. Something about the absolute silence down here. You'd think it'd be peaceful, but it's the opposite. Your ears keep straining, waiting for some sound that never comes. Then it did. Sharp metallic ping against the hull. Like someone tapping a wrench against the outer shell, maybe 10 feet from my bunk. Sound cut through the platform's frame like a bell. Made me sit up so fast I cracked my skull against the overhead storage compartment. Jesus Christ. I rubbed my head and listened. Nothing but the usual background noise. Air recycler cycling, water pumps humming, distant electrical buzz from the main power distribution panel. Maybe a piece of debris had drifted down from the surface. 3 miles is a long way to fall, but stranger things had happened. Then it came again. Same spot, same sharp metallic sound, and again, patterns started forming. 3 quick taps, pause, 3 longer taps, maybe twice the duration, another pause, 3 more quick ones. My hands went cold. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Every kid who'd ever played with a flashlight or tapped on a desk knew that pattern. SOS, the International Distress Signal. But that was impossible. We were 3 miles down in the middle of the Atlantic. Nothing lived at this depth except microscopic organisms and maybe some deep-sea fish. Certainly nothing that could tap out Morse code on a research platform's hull. I lay there for maybe 20 minutes, listening. The pattern repeated 6 more times, always from the same location, always the same rhythm. Then, silence. Sleep didn't come after that. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, running through possibilities. Thermal expansion was the most likely explanation. Metal contracting and expanding with temperature changes. The platform's hull was constantly adjusting to pressure differentials at this depth. Could easily produce rhythmic, pinging sounds. The fact that it sounded like SOS was just coincidence. Pattern recognition gone wrong. Human brain's tendency to find meaning in random noise. Had to be. Morning brought my scheduled check-in with Jasmine. I waited until after we'd covered the routine status reports. Environmental readings, equipment diagnostics, sample collection progress. Then I mentioned the sounds. Heard some unusual acoustic activity last night, I said, keeping my voice casual. Metallic pinging against the hull. Thought you should know. Static crackled over the comm line. 3-second delay for the signal to travel up through 3 miles of water, bounce off the surface relay, and reach the coordination station. Can you describe the pattern? Jasmine's voice came back, calm and professional as always. 3 short pings, 3 longer ones, 3 short again, repeated several times over maybe an hour period. Another delay. Thermal expansion from pressure differentials, very common at extreme depths. The hull materials contract and expand in response to temperature fluctuations, creates rhythmic stress patterns that can sound quite distinct. Made perfect sense. Exactly what I'd been telling myself. I've seen this before on other deep-sea installations, she continued. Nothing to be concerned about. The platform's structural integrity remains completely sound. Right. Just wanted to document it. Of course. Proper protocol. Anything else unusual to report? No, ma'am. Everything else running normal. Excellent. Next scheduled check-in at 1400 hours. Coordination out. The line went dead. I felt better after that. Professional explanation from someone with years of experience in deep-sea operations. Thermal expansion. Made perfect sense. Except the sounds came back the next night, and the night after that. Always the same time. Between 2 and 3 in the morning. Always the same location along the hull. Always the same pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. By the end of the first week, they were getting louder. By the end of the second week, I could feel the vibrations through the platform's frame. Time to get serious about documentation. I requisitioned acoustic sensors from the equipment bay. Sensitive microphones designed for monitoring marine life. Installed them at 6 points around the platform's perimeter, focused on the areas where the sounds seemed strongest. The work took me 3 days. Had to suit up and go outside for some of the installations, which I hated. Nothing but black water stretching in every direction. Pressure suit's headlamp carving out a tiny cone of visibility in the endless dark. Every time I worked outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching from just beyond the light. But I got the sensors in place, calibrated them properly, connected everything to the main data logging system. The next time the sounds came, I was ready. 2:23 in the morning. I was already awake, sitting at the monitoring station with headphones on and recording equipment running. First ping came through crystal clear on sensors 4 and 5, the ones mounted on the platform's starboard side. Sharp metallic impact, definitely originating from outside the hull. No question about thermal expansion now. This was something making deliberate contact with the platform. 3 short pings. Pause. 3 long pings. Pause. 3 short pings. I recorded everything. 26 repetitions of the pattern over 47 minutes. Then silence. Spent the rest of the night analyzing the recordings. Ran them through audio processing software. checked the waveforms, measured the intervals between each ping. Everything was precise, mathematical, deliberate. That's when I noticed something that made my hands start shaking. The intervals weren't random. They matched standard Morse code timing exactly. Short pings lasting 0.2 seconds, long pings lasting 0.6 seconds, pauses of 0.2 seconds between individual letters, 0.6 seconds between complete letters. Someone was tapping out Morse code on the hull of my platform, 3 miles beneath the Atlantic Ocean. I sat there staring at the audio analysis for maybe an hour, trying to convince myself I was seeing patterns that weren't really there. But the math didn't lie. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Over the following days, I started recording every instance. The sounds came every night now, sometimes multiple times. Always the same basic pattern, but with variations, different sequences, different durations. I fed everything into a Morse code translation program. The first message was simple, SOS, the International Distress Signal. The second one made my blood run cold, HELP, then TRAPPED, and finally, the one that made me understand I was dealing with something impossible, CANNOTSURFACE. Someone was down here with me, someone who knew Morse code, someone who was trapped and couldn't reach the surface, but that was impossible. I called Jasmine during the next scheduled check-in, told her everything, played her the recordings, showed her the translation data. The acoustic patterns you're hearing are consistent with thermal stress, she said after reviewing my analysis. The platform's hull undergoes constant expansion and contraction cycles at this depth. It's entirely possible for these cycles to create rhythmic patterns that might appear to have structure. But the timing matches Morse code exactly. Pattern recognition is a powerful cognitive bias, Aiden. When humans are isolated for extended periods, the brain often interprets random stimuli as meaningful patterns. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon. I wanted to argue, wanted to insist that the mathematics proved something was sending deliberate messages, but doubt was creeping in. Maybe she was right. Maybe isolation was affecting my judgment. I understand your concern, Jasmine continued, but I need you to consider the possibility that extended isolation is influencing your perception. We've seen this before with long-term deep-sea assignments. The way she said it made something twist in my gut. Like she was talking about Solomon. Like she thought I was heading down the same path. I'm documenting everything properly, I said, following all protocols. Of course you are. You're an excellent researcher, but I want you to be aware of the psychological pressures you're facing down there. If you need to discuss any concerns about your mental state, I'm fine. I know you are. Just remember that asking for support isn't a sign of weakness. It's proper protocol. The line went dead. That night the messages came again. Longer this time. More complex. HELPTRAPPEDCANNOTSURFACE. I sat there in the dark, listening to someone tap out desperate pleas for help on the hull of my platform, and wondered if I was losing my mind. Maybe Jasmine was right. Maybe isolation was getting to me. Maybe I was seeing patterns that didn't exist, hearing messages in random noise. But the recordings were real. The mathematics were solid. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Either someone was down here sending messages, or I was having the most detailed and consistent hallucination in the history of deep-sea research. My confidence was cracking like ice under pressure. Every night brought new messages. Every morning brought new doubts about my own sanity. And somewhere in the darkness outside my hull, something kept tapping. Whatever confidence I'd managed to scrape together over those weeks down here, gone. Wiped clean the moment I cracked open Solomon's personal files. My hands shook as I scrolled through entry after entry. The guy hadn't just heard the tapping. He'd been tracking it, recording it, breaking it down piece by piece like some kind of underwater detective. Day 43. Pattern repeats every 11 minutes, 37 seconds. Morse code confirmed. Day 45. Message identical to transmission recorded by previous team. Equipment failure story doesn't match evidence. Day 48. Decoded full sequence. Not random, not natural. Someone or something is broadcasting. The cursor blinked at the bottom of his final entry. I'd read it twice already, but my brain kept refusing to process what it meant. Day 51. The lights aren't bioluminescent. They're artificial. Geometric patterns moving beneath the platform in coordinated sweeps. Whatever's down there has been using us as bait. Bait. I leaned back in the workstation chair, metal creaking under my weight. The platform hummed around me, all those familiar sounds I'd grown comfortable with. Ventilation cycling, hull expansion joints settling, the distant whisper of current against our support cables. Everything felt different now, like I'd been living inside a trap this whole time without knowing it. Solomon's research notes filled 3 separate folders: temperature readings, current measurements, biological samples, all the standard data you'd expect from a marine biologist. But buried in the metadata, he'd been tracking something else entirely: signal patterns, light frequencies, movement vectors that didn't match any known deep-sea phenomena. The previous research team hadn't ended their mission due to equipment failure. That was just the official story. I scrolled down to his final coherent entry, dated 3 days before his extraction. The structure isn't natural. Angular surfaces, too precise for geological formation, covered in decades of marine growth, maybe longer. It's been here waiting. Every research mission, every deep-sea platform that gets lowered into this zone, we're not studying the abyss. We're being studied. My throat felt tight. The coffee mug beside my keyboard had gone cold hours ago, brown film floating on the surface like a miniature oil spill. Solomon's last words were barely readable, handwriting deteriorating into desperate scratches across the digital tablet. It knows I'm listening now. The lights respond when I watch. They're learning our patterns just like I learned theirs. Don't trust the surface team. They know more than they're telling. Get out while you can. That was it. No more entries after that. I closed the files and stared at the blank screen, my reflection wavering in the dark monitor. Wire-rimmed glasses crooked on my nose. Stubble I hadn't bothered shaving for 3 days. Eyes that looked older than they had 6 weeks ago. This time, I didn't hesitate. I pulled up the external camera controls, fingers moving across the interface faster than I'd ever operated them before. 8 high-definition cameras mounted around the platform's hull. Usually, I kept them focused on biological collection sites or equipment monitoring points. Tonight, I aimed them straight down. The cameras took 30 seconds to adjust to the absolute darkness 3 miles beneath the surface. When the infrared filters kicked in, I expected to see the usual view: empty abyssal plains stretching in all directions. Maybe a few deep-sea creatures drifting through the frame like ghosts. Instead, I saw lights. Not the soft, organic glow of bioluminescent jellies or anglerfish. These were sharp geometric patterns etched across something massive on the seafloor directly beneath us. Angular surfaces covered in what looked like coral growth, but too symmetrical to be natural. Too deliberate. The structure stretched beyond the camera's field of view in every direction. Hull plating or something similar, arranged in precise geometric sections. And those lights, white-hot pinpricks moving in synchronized waves across the surface like some kind of display screen. I watched for 20 minutes. The lights pulsed in patterns that matched Solomon's decoded sequences exactly. The same 11-minute, 37-second cycle, the same Morse repetitions. Whatever was down there had been broadcasting to us this entire time. My hands were steady as I initiated the data uplink to the surface. Standard protocol required all significant findings to be transmitted immediately to the Research Coordination Center. Jasmine would want to see this. Hell, everyone would want to see this. The upload bar crawled across my screen. 47 minutes of high-definition footage, compressed and encrypted according to marine research protocols. When it finished, I opened a direct communication channel. Surface Control, this is Nereid 7. I'm transmitting camera footage that requires immediate analysis. We have a situation down here. Jasmine's voice came through clear as always, that slight German accent making her sound calm and professional even at 2 in the morning surface time. Received, Aiden. What kind of situation are we looking at? Large artificial structure on the seafloor, definitely not geological. Active lighting systems, appears to be the source of the acoustic signals I've been reporting. Silence for almost a minute. Then, Aiden, I'm reviewing your footage now. I'm seeing standard abyssal plain topography, empty seafloor, some scattered debris, but no structures of any kind. The words hit me like cold water. That's impossible. The camera's recorded for 47 minutes. The structure covers at least 3 square kilometers. I understand your concern, but the footage shows only empty ocean floor, no artificial lighting, no geometric patterns. It's possible your equipment is experiencing pressure-related malfunctions. We've seen similar issues with extended deep-sea deployments. I stared at the monitor, watching those synchronized lights pulse across that massive structure. Real as the keyboard under my fingers, real as the metal walls around me. Jasmine, I'm looking at it right now. The lights are active. The structure is there. Aiden, I need you to run a full diagnostic on your camera systems. Check the pressure seals. Recalibrate the sensors. What you're describing simply isn't appearing in our data. The communication channel went quiet, except for the soft hiss of static. I sat there in the dark, 3 miles down, watching lights move across something that, according to my surface coordinator, didn't exist. Watching patterns that matched Solomon's final research exactly. Patterns that had driven the previous marine biologist to desperate warnings about the surface team. Something wasn't right about their responses. Something hadn't been right from the beginning. And I was starting to understand why Solomon's handwriting had deteriorated into frantic scratches in those final entries. They knew more than they were telling. They'd always known. The morning I figured out they were watching me watch them, that's when the real fear started. I'd been sending my daily reports up the cable for 3 weeks since finding Solomon's files. Standard procedure, water temperature readings, pressure measurements, equipment status updates. All the boring technical stuff that keeps the bureaucrats happy topside. But something nagged at me about Jasmine's responses. Too smooth, too quick. Like she already knew what I was going to report before I sent it. So I ran a little test. Nothing fancy, just mentioned in my morning transmission that I'd spotted some unusual coral formations about 200 meters northeast of the platform. Complete fabrication, made up the GPS coordinates on the spot. Her response came back in under 10 minutes. Received your report on coral formations. Will note for geological survey team. Standard acknowledgement, professional, exactly what you'd expect from surface coordination. Except I'd been keeping detailed logs of response times for weeks. Every other transmission took at least 20 minutes to process, sometimes 40 when they had to check with the research committee. But my fake coral report? 10 minutes flat, like she'd been waiting for it. I stared at the response display until my eyes burned. The timestamp didn't lie. Neither did my stomach, which had twisted itself into something resembling a sailor's knot. They were filtering everything. Had to be. Someone up there was reading my reports, deciding what to pass along, what to bury, maybe rewriting the whole damn thing before it reached anyone who mattered. My hands moved across the communication panel without conscious thought. Time to test the jamming theory that had been eating at me for days. I pulled up the emergency frequency database, direct channels to other deep-sea research stations scattered across the Atlantic shelf. Protocol said to use these only for genuine emergencies, but 3 weeks of mounting paranoia felt pretty fucking urgent. Started with Cousteau Station, 400 nautical miles northeast. Research vessel similar to Nereid 7, same depth range, probably dealing with the same bureaucratic bullshit I was drowning in. Cousteau Station, this is Nereid 7 calling on emergency frequency 77 Alpha. Do you copy? Static. Tried again. Adjusted the transmission power, checked the antenna alignment through the hull sensors. Everything showed green. Cousteau Station, Nereid 7 requesting communication check. Please respond. Nothing but the electronic hiss of dead airwaves. Moved down the list. Mariana Research Platform, Deep Atlantic Survey Station 12. Even tried reaching the surface coordination vessels for the other projects. Anything to get a signal through to someone who wasn't part of whatever operation Jasmine was running. Every frequency came back empty. Not the normal kind of empty you get from distance or bad weather. This was the hollow silence of sophisticated jamming equipment. The kind of electronic barrier that costs serious money to maintain. The kind that takes planning. I slumped back in the communication chair, watching the green static waves dance across the display screen. They'd isolated me completely. 3 miles down in a metal tube, connected to the surface by a single umbilical cord they controlled from both ends. Just like Solomon. The realization hit me like decompression sickness. Sudden, brutal, leaving me gasping for breath that tasted like recycled fear. This wasn't about marine biology research. Never had been. They'd sent me down here to observe something they already knew existed. Document it, record its behavior. Study the thing that had been tapping against Solomon's hull for months before his mission ended. I opened his notebook again, flipping past the deteriorating handwriting and frantic calculations to the sketches I'd barely glanced at before. Technical drawings filled the margins, precise engineering diagrams showing the platform's docking mechanisms from angles I'd never seen in the official schematics. Solomon had been planning something. The drawing showed external clamps, emergency release protocols, even depth calculations for a controlled descent beyond the platform's normal operational range. The son of a bitch had tried to go down there. Had tried to find whatever was making the noise. My fingers traced the sketched measurements. Depth readings that went deeper than our standard survey equipment was rated for. Pressure calculations that made my engineering background scream warnings about hull integrity and safe operational limits. But Solomon had worked it all out anyway. Every angle, every contingency, like a man preparing for a one-way trip. The platform's lighting system chose that moment to begin its evening dimming cycle, dropping from full operational brightness to the subdued amber glow that simulated surface night patterns. Standard procedure to help maintain circadian rhythms during extended deep-sea deployment. I'd grown used to the transition over the past 6 weeks. Comforting, almost. A reminder that somewhere above the crushing darkness, normal people were watching the sun set over normal ocean waves. But tonight felt different. Tonight, as the lights dimmed to their lowest setting, I saw something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Bioluminescence. Rising from the depths below the platform in streams of electric blue and phosphorescent green. Beautiful hypnotic trails of light spiraling upward through the black water like living galaxies. I'd seen bioluminescent plankton before. Deep-sea jellyfish. The natural light shows that make marine biology worth the isolation and pressure headaches. This wasn't natural. The lights moved with purpose. Perfect helical patterns, mathematical precision in their spiral ascent. Each trail followed identical paths, synchronized timing, geometric perfection that no natural organism could maintain. I pressed my face against the observation dome's thick acrylic, watching the light show unfold in the crushing darkness below. The patterns were trying to tell me something. Had to be. The same intelligence that controlled the tapping, the same presence that Solomon had been tracking for months. And right on cue, the metallic tapping started again. But not from one direction this time. All around me. Multiple contact points across the platform's hull, a percussion symphony of calculated strikes that surrounded Nereid 7 completely. Port side, starboard, above, below, whatever was out there had me encircled. The rhythm was different too, more complex. Patterns within patterns, like someone drumming out coordinates on a metal desk. Numbers, measurements, precise data transmitted through the universal language of mathematics. I grabbed Solomon's notebook, flipping to the pages where he'd been tracking the tap sequences. The patterns I was hearing now matched his later entries, the ones where his handwriting had started falling apart and his calculations had grown increasingly frantic. Coordinates, depth measurements, bearing calculations. They were trying to guide me somewhere. My hands shook as I plotted the coordinates on the platform's navigation system. The numbers led to a position approximately 300 meters northwest of our current location, at a depth that made my engineering training scream warnings about structural integrity and safe operational parameters. But Solomon had calculated the same coordinates weeks ago, had been preparing for the same descent I was being invited to make. The tapping continued, patient and persistent, while the bioluminescent spirals pulsed in perfect synchronization below. Through the murky water beyond the platform's light range, I caught glimpses of something massive moving in the darkness. Not the fluid motion of sea life, too angular, too deliberate. Mechanical shapes that belonged 3 miles underwater about as much as I did. I barricaded myself in the communications bay like some kind of cornered animal. My hands moved without thinking, grabbing toolboxes, dragging them against the hatch, wedging chair legs under the handle mechanism. The metal floor felt cold through my coveralls as I scrambled around on my knees, sealing myself into the one room that might keep whatever was coming from getting inside. But that wasn't enough. Not even close. The docking controls sat in their housing panel near the main hatch, big red switches and mechanical levers that would let something attached to the platform lock onto us, board us. My fingers found the access panel and ripped it open, exposing the circuit boards underneath. I'd never sabotaged anything before in my life. Didn't matter. I grabbed the nearest wrench and started smashing. Sparks flew as I crushed relay after relay. Blue flashes lit up the cramped bay while I destroyed every connection that might let those things get inside. The acrid smell of burned electronics filled my nose. My glasses slipped down with sweat as I hammered at components I couldn't even name. When the docking system display went dark, I felt something like relief. Whatever was down there would have to work a lot harder to get in. That relief lasted about 30 seconds. The acoustic array started screaming alerts I'd never heard before. Multiple contacts, massive signatures rising from below. The display showed dots climbing from the deepest parts of the trench, objects too big and moving too fast to be anything natural. I pressed my face against the sonar screen, watching those contacts ascend. The computer kept trying to classify them, running through its database of known marine life. Whale, negative. Giant squid, negative. Submersible vessel, negative. Unknown, unknown, unknown. 7 contacts now. 8. Moving in formation like they'd planned this. The tapping stopped. For maybe 10 seconds, blessed silence filled the platform. I actually started breathing again, thinking maybe whatever had been out there had given up and swum away. Then the pounding started. Not the gentle tapping I'd gotten used to over these weeks. This was different, rhythmic, deliberate, like something with real strength was testing the hull for weak spots. The whole platform shuddered with each impact. Coffee cups rattled in their holders. Tools slid across work surfaces. The lights flickered with every blow. I switched the external cameras to full sweep, desperate to see what was hitting us. Most of the views showed nothing but darkness and swirling sediment, but camera 7 caught something, a glimpse of segmented metal, too geometric to be natural, too large to be human-made. The image lasted maybe 3 seconds before whatever it was moved out of frame, but I saw enough. Articulated joints, smooth surfaces that reflected our lights, appendages that moved with mechanical precision. Camera 12 picked up movement next. Something pressed against the observation window in the main lab, a surface that looked manufactured, panels and seams visible through the reinforced glass. I could make out what might have been sensors or instruments embedded in whatever was looking back at me. The pounding intensified. Now it was coming from multiple directions, above, below, all around us. They weren't trying to break in anymore. They were announcing themselves. That's when the platform started rising. No warning, no system alerts. The emergency ascent protocols just kicked in without anyone touching the controls. The depth gauge numbers started spinning backward as we climbed through the water column. 2,800 feet, 2,700, 26. I grabbed the intercom handset and started hammering the transmit button. Surface control, this is Nereid 7. Emergency ascent system has activated without authorization. Please respond. Static answered me for about 10 seconds. Then Jasmine's voice came through crystal clear. But it wasn't the same voice I'd been talking to for weeks. Gone was the concerned tone, the careful medical questions about my mental state. This Jasmine sounded businesslike, professional, cold. Aiden, your observational period has concluded successfully. Your data collection regarding deep abyssal contact protocols has been extremely valuable. Contact protocols. I felt something heavy drop in my stomach. What the hell are you talking about, Jasmine? What contact protocols? Your role in this experiment is now complete. Remain calm during surface transit. Decontamination teams are standing by. Decontamination. Experiment. The pieces started falling together like dominoes in my head. The gaps in Solomon's reports. The way my questions about equipment failures always got deflected. The convenient assignment that put me down here just as these things started showing interest in the platform. You knew, I said into the handset. My voice came out flat. You knew something was down here. Maintain position in the communications bay until further instruction. The depth gauge read 1,500 feet now. We were climbing fast. Whatever had been pounding on the hull wasn't following us up. At least the acoustic array wasn't tracking any pursuing contacts. Maybe they'd gotten what they wanted. Maybe they'd just been checking us out. Or maybe they'd been checking me out. 1,000 feet, 800, 500. Sunlight started filtering down through the water above us. After 6 weeks in total darkness, even that faint glow made my eyes water behind my glasses. 200 feet. The platform broke the surface with a massive splash that threw me against the communications console. Water cascaded off the observation windows as we bobbed in swells that felt enormous after the stable depths. But when I looked out at the surface, I didn't see the research vessel Meridian that had dropped me down here 6 weeks ago. Military gray hull stretched across my field of vision. Gun mounts, radar arrays, men in combat gear moving across the deck with automatic weapons held ready. A patrol boat was already moving toward us. I could see figures in tactical vests preparing boarding lines. And standing at the bow of the main vessel, watching our platform through binoculars, was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, military bearing, gray crew cut visible even from this distance. Julian Harris. Had to be. The name had been on half the classified documents I'd found in Solomon's files. I sank into the chair in front of the communications console, finally understanding what I'd walked into down here. Nereid 7 wasn't a research platform. It was a monitoring station, a listening post dropped into the deepest parts of the ocean to watch things that had been down there long before humans figured out how to build boats. And I'd been the latest observer, the newest set of eyes and ears they'd lowered into the darkness to gather data on whatever was living in those trenches. Solomon before me, probably others before him. All of us thinking we were studying the deep ocean when really we were studying something else entirely. Something that had been waiting down there in the abyssal darkness since before human civilization had even figured out agriculture. The patrol boat pulled alongside our platform with military precision. Grappling hooks secured lines to our hull. Men in tactical gear started boarding through the main airlock, not the gentle research technicians I'd expected, but soldiers with weapons and equipment I couldn't identify. Through the communications bay porthole, I watched Julian Harris step onto the platform. He moved like a man who'd done this before, many times. His steel-gray eyes swept across our hull, checking for damage, looking for signs of whatever had been down there with me. He spoke into a radio handset. I couldn't hear the words through the thick glass, but his expression told me everything. This was proceeding exactly as planned. They'd known what was down there all along, known it was intelligent, known it was interested in us, and they'd been feeding it observers for who knows how long, gathering intelligence on entities that had probably been watching human development from the deepest parts of the ocean. Waiting, learning, planning. I pressed my back against the chair and closed my eyes. 6 weeks of thinking I was going crazy. 6 weeks of wondering if the isolation was getting to me. 6 weeks of tapping and signals and messages that I'd tried to convince myself were just pressure psychosis. But they'd been real, all of it. And now whatever was down there knew everything about me. How I thought, how I reacted under pressure, what kinds of technology we had, what our limitations were, just like they'd learned from Solomon and whoever came before him. The boarding team reached the communications bay. I could hear them working on the hatch, probably cutting through the barricade I'd built. Military efficiency. They'd have me out of here in minutes. I looked down at the acoustic display one more time. The contacts were gone. The deep ocean array showed nothing but empty water and settling sediment, but I knew they were still down there, waiting in the trenches that humans had barely begun to explore, patient as the deep ocean itself, gathering information about the surface world through unwitting observers like me. And now they had everything they needed to know about how we thought, how we reacted, how we built our technology. The hatch opened behind me, combat boots on metal flooring, professional voices giving orders. I didn't turn around. I just stared at that empty sonar display and wondered how long those things had been down there, how long they'd been waiting for us to develop enough to be worth their attention.